all for coming this evening. I'm really excited to see so many friendly faces and new faces. The World Business Academy is really excited to have this second in a series of two, it seems, discussion around our downtown. So the reason I'm here, I'm Judy Weisbart. I'm Community Outreach for the World Business Academy, Vice President. I've been involved with the Academy for almost 5 years. It's been an amazing ride. We have worked on things such as microgrids, which actually we had a meeting today about Montecito going on a microgrid. That's been something that Ronaldo Brutico's been really discussing with everybody that would listen for the past 5 years, and now it's, I think, coming to fruition with an amazing organization that's partnering with the World Business Academy, which is Clean Coalition. They're here too, I think, tonight. And in addition to tonight's experience that you will have, which is to really have a conversation and be told a lot of amazing information about downtown, we're also going to do a few other events such as this in the fall. And that'll be around transportation and housing. Those two will be very similar to this. We really love this system of having people talk to one another, realize the importance of their voice within our community, and coming and listening to people with other voices and other ideas. I think that Santa Barbara has always been a place that I've lived in for 37 years where we actually do listen to each other. And we're really grateful that you chose to be here. I just want to tell you a bit about what the World Business Academy stands for. And one of the things it stands for is, from the beginning, has always been to close Diablo Canyon earlier rather than later. It is a dangerous site. I'm sure that many of you feel the same as we do, which is that we need to protect our communities, but we also need to protect our planet. Nuclear power is not a healthy part of our planet. So if you have interest in that, please go to the site and look at what's going on in your community that's really about you. It's not about anything other than a community that lives in a world that we want to make better. So this is the first moment that I have to say welcome to everyone, to introduce the founder and the president of the World Business Academy, Ronaldo Brutico. Tonight he will start our conversation. We have 4 other panelists who will discuss issues that came up in like 8 weeks ago when we had our last big forum like this. And we hope that each and every one of you will get something out of this, but please feel free to call us to let us know what you want to know. The other thing I want to say is that we're going to ask questions and answers at the end. And thank you for all of you that have spent the time, because there's so much to do in this community every night. Tonight is the night that we're going to work out what we're going to do with our downtown. Welcome, Ronaldo Brutico, please.
Thanks. 37 years of continuous service to this community. That's Judy. Thanks, Judy. Thank you everyone for coming. So this started last February. The World Business Academy, which does most of its stuff on a non-local basis, but we also believe in thinking globally, which is what we do mostly, and acting locally, which is what this conversation is about tonight. So last February, we convened a meeting. And at that meeting, we tried to get everybody's voice in the room who had something to offer on the question of what to do with our downtown retail. And tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to be having a very interesting conversation. Most of tonight will be actually you talking and asking questions of the panel up here. We've set it up so that tonight, the energy that came in the last meeting gets a chance to fully express itself. So there'll be at least 40 or 45 minutes at the end of this meeting for you to be able to ask your questions and make your comments. What I'm going to do is set the agenda so you'll know what we're going to accomplish and how, and then we're going to turn it over to the panel at that point. So when that meeting happened in February, we didn't know what was going to come out of it. The Academy starts these things quite often, and our job is to support good conversations happening, catalyzing good conversations. And because we're a business academy, our methodology is to use the tools of business to see if we can bring resolution. Our goal for over 30 years has been to bring basically better solutions to society by having business take responsibility for those solutions. And the retail conditions on State Street clearly qualify under that agenda. So in the meeting that happened last February, a lot of different voices came forward. People were looking at this from different points of the compass. Landlords had one issue about what they thought needed to happen, particularly with the city permitting processes to permit them to split their shops into smaller units so that people could try new retail concepts and then see if it worked and then grow. Also with permitting, either pop-outs, meaning those places where people can eat on the sidewalk, like at Arigato Sushi and a couple others that along the way there have had Pascucci and some others. Some other people said, no, the problem's homeless. The problem is the homeless. You know, we got so many homeless, it drives people away. Other people said it's the problem that nobody comes downtown at night. Some people said it's the lighting. Some people said it's the cars that go up and down State Street. Some people said it was that we don't have enough housing units so that there's people living there on State Street that would actually bring energy. Other people had other solutions. I'm not going to list them all because you'll be hearing a lot of them tonight. And the goal we came up with, what we need to do is get all the voices to act together, to start putting together the comprehensive plan. I want to thank Hal Conklin for that because Hal put the last one together 30 years ago. And as Hal, which worked for a long time, and as Hal admitted in the meeting in February, you know, you got to refresh things at least once every 30 years. and he's right. So the Academy said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to take our resources and we're going to catalyze this conversation. We're going to help this conversation to happen, and then we're going to support the people with the most interest in having a successful conclusion to this conversation, because we're only about solutions at the Academy. We're only about how do we make it work? How does business take responsibility for the whole of society? That's what we do. And in that context, we started looking for resources. So one of the first speakers you're going to hear about from tonight is Jerry Ogburn. And Jerry was the single, I think, and he's too modest to say this, but he's the single reason why Palm Springs went from a downtown you would never want to walk in to a downtown that everybody seeks out as a fun place to do things that are exciting and entertainment oriented, et cetera. Jerry was kind enough to agree to come here on his own nickel, so to speak to us and share his experience, and he'll be our first speaker tonight. So you can hear how Palm Springs actually did it. Went from a worse situation than we've got to something that really worked and created a higher tax base in the process. And I want you to know, nothing here tonight should cost us money. Every solution you hear, even the ones that are going to come from Ron Fox about the homeless problem, those solutions will generate more revenue in retail sales, sales taxes, bed taxes. It will not only pay for itself, it's a profit center to fix this problem. And we know that if everybody in this room, together with, we're delighted that the mayor has joined us tonight. Thank you for coming, Mayor Murillo. I think we have at least one city councilman I saw earlier. Two? Okay, Jason's back there. Where's Kristen? Oh, hi, Kristen. So now we have 3 city council individuals listening to this conversation and hoping to learn from us and from what comes next. I'm also going to introduce, shortly after Jerry speaks, we're going to introduce Amy. Amy Cooper runs 2 very successful stores on State Street, Plum Goods, it's called. I was completely impressed with what she said in the February meeting and not only her tenacity to want to solve the problem, but her willingness to look at it from every point in the compass. I'm extremely pleased to report that tonight, at the end of this meeting, most of what we had to do at the Academy will transition to the task force. We're calling it the Santa Barbara Retail Task Force that Amy's agreed to be chairwoman of. So thank you, Amy, for doing that. I mentioned Ron Fox a minute ago. I have profound respect for Ron, who is a businessman who spent 35 years now trying to come up with solutions and working for the homeless. He belongs to the board of directors of PATH out of Los Angeles, which recently acquired our Casa Esperanza. My wife Lala and I had an opportunity to serve for a couple years on that board with Ron, and we got how really dedicated he is and how grounded he is and how practical he is. So we said, Ron, we really need you on the task force because without a comprehensive solution to the homeless problem, we're not going to fix State Street. So we just got to realize this is part of our community's issue, and it's in our economic interests to solve it as a community. The next person I'll introduce, which I already referred to, is Hal Conklin, who's also agreed to serve on the task force. Hal, as you know, I said a moment ago, not only was the mayor when we adopted the first State Street program 30 years ago, he was the guy that was invited to go to Palm Springs about 15 years ago and tell him how we did it. Jerry invited him. And so the circle comes full circle around. Jerry's returning the favor tonight. So those are our panelists, and what we really want from you is what you think, so this task force can get off to a great start. So thank you for coming, and without further ado, I want to introduce Jerry Ogburn, who's now retired. He runs, well, semi-retired. He runs MSA Consulting. We have passed out to all of you these bios so we don't have to read them. So now you've heard the biographical information. Jerry's a fabulous guy. I've really gotten to know him in the last couple of days, and his wife Val, who's here somewhere. Hey Val, thank you for coming too, and thank you for offering your services to our city. Jerry, take it.
Thank you very much. I need to get up here and speak quickly because the time I'm allotted keeps going down. It started out at 20 minutes, now it's down to 10 to maybe 15. So anyway, I'm really happy to be here. The temperature in Palm Springs today was 107. Don't talk to me about being warm. Okay. Yeah, I came to Palm Springs. I had a consulting practice in Colorado in 1990, 91. Had been there for 10 years, Colorado Springs. And I met a guy named Bob Shelton. We were consulting work together for Prudential Realty in Denver, and he had this proposal to Palm Springs, and Sonny Bono was the new mayor, and that's a trip in itself. That was a whole story. But you know, you see these T-shirts that says, "I got you, babe." Well, he got me. Anyway, so we wrote a proposal, and we were selected to do it. And Robert had been involved in starting and headed up the starting of a downtown convention center, which is still it's been expanded 3 times, I think, since the original is still there. So what I felt at that point, Palm Springs had the name, which I thought was a joke, but wasn't. It was called God's Waiting Room. And it was and that was serious, because that was what the market was. We're elderly people, and there was little hope. It was about a 45% vacancy rate. Don't talk to me about your problems. 45% vacancy rate, and of the occupied, there may be 25% of those were basically just staying open and not really doing business. They had the Desert Fashion Plaza, which was eventually closed. It was a DeBartolo-owned mall, three anchor mall, never successful. Tore it down finally in a new downtown. And basically the theme of mine tonight is to show how we went from God's waiting room to an attraction for millennials, the future, and that's where we are today. And that happened, a lot of that happened after I left. But what was key to our proposal was that I agreed to open a downtown development center. I have a background in architecture, a master's in city planning, urban design, and I would run the office downtown storefront. You have vacant storefronts? Well, here's a use for one. Don't like ground floor office space, but having a design studio where I can meet one-on-one with property owners, with business owners, and with city council and staff. And it was a one-on-one, getting to know you kind of exercise. We had a situation where there were 3 organizations representing downtown. There was a DBID, Downtown Business Improvement District, that was voted out the week I got there. That was organization 1. So there was the ash heap over here. There was another organization called Palm Springs Now. I thought that was kind of ironic. And those were the property owners that met in the back rooms and smoked cigars and talked about what rents they were going to get and all this kind of stuff. And there were some really good people in there, but there were some that were, and we had also a huge absentee owner problem, huge. And they didn't want tenants because they just messed things up. The third organization was Main Street, which was a city organization. It was people from planning department, economic development, parks and recreation, public outreach, and so on that met monthly and talked about Main Street type of issues. But there was 3 groups. So the first thing we did, new city manager came in from Miami Beach, and we fought a lot of light, and what are we going to do with this thing? And we said, well, we got to fold this into one organization. So we set up Palm Springs Main Street, new charter, new bylaws and everything. Had a board of directors that were 11-person board of directors, 5 elected block captains. That's a key. Each block, or 2 blocks, had 1 representative that was elected to the board. Then we had property owners that were nominated by Palm Springs Now, and they eventually that organization sort of went away. And then the Agua Caliente tribe was represented. That's a big factor in Palm Springs. So we got that going, but we reorganized Main Street. One thing that I don't have time since I only have 10 minutes to talk about all the problems. But the value of having the Downtown Development Center with an objective voice, didn't own property, that wasn't running for political office, it wasn't trying to, was under contract, could talk to all these 3 interest groups independently, was very, very key to the whole process. One of the first things we did, downtown was not lit, no street lighting. You have some lighting out here, which needs some improvement, I think. But we had nothing. We had a dark sky ordinance, and lighting was a no-no, as was outdoor dining. Couldn't do outdoor dining. Couldn't do no lighting. We're dying, right? So we're cutting off. No night business. Locals, we aren't going down there. So anyway, we started a demonstration project on about a half block next to the Plaza Theater, where the Palm Springs Follies was opening. And this is interesting because it was a salute to vaudeville, or the music of the 40s, and you had to be 55 years or older to be in the cast. Like I said, we call it God's waiting room, and that was very successful because they bust people in to see that. Anyway, but we started the lighting program, 3 light fixtures, and in this area, and a guy wanted to open a coffee bar there at the Jazz Club. And when he went into City Hall, they said, you can't do outdoor dining. He wanted to do French doors. Nope, you got to put in a storefront, fixed storefront. And besides, nobody drinks coffee in the desert. What are you doing here? And by the way, your in lieu parking fee for a 1,000 square foot coffee bar is, are you ready? $62,000. Yeah. So that was our work program. Get a moratorium on the parking fee, get legislation in place for outdoor dining, which was given free. No fee was charged. It was a free space. We had design guidelines. They had to carry $1 million insurance policy and name the city as an added insured. But it's like, that's where people were sitting. The restaurant might be empty, but people were on the sidewalk. And it's the best sign you can ever have, is have outdoor dining. I think you have outdoor dining, but about half as much as you really need. Be quite honest about it. We started an event called Village Fest. Now, a lighting program started on 1 block. Let me follow up. 1 block. It's like building a design guideline. Today, in fact, before I left, that about 3/4 of a mile of Palm Canyon Drive was lined with lighting fixtures, entirely voluntarily paid for by the property owners. Entirely. They just we did the demonstration project, and they saw it, they liked it. These guys were getting market rents, they were full. They said, hey, where do I sign up? So the power of a demonstration project really pays off. It didn't cost the city anything, literally, because the property owner paid for the lights. The other thing we did, and by the way, the lights, I've seen your lights, and what we did is something that had a cutoff lens and that casts the light down. We ought to be using LED lights. I think the fixtures you have are probably not the best environmental solution in the world. And you don't want to be throwing light up in the air. You want it directed down. 1 foot candle, we had it all designed. Anyway, but lighting was very important because now we suddenly had a night district, and retailers were staying open because people were there. We were appealing to local residents, so we started Village Fest on Thursday night. Every Thursday night at Fine Arts and Crafts Fair in Palm Canyon Drive. Village Fest started off 1 block. Everybody said, no, it's going to die. The retailer says, it's going to kill us. The restaurants are going, it's going to kill us. Right. You get a lot of reasons why not, understand why it's God's waiting room now, because they were at a death wish. Anyway, we opened that up. Now, today, the Village Fest is still going. We're still going, and it's a mile long. You have 150 vendors in it. Has every Thursday night, summer and winter. Tonight, they're having Village Fest. Sorry I missed it. Anyway, but at a farmer's market, this was tailored for the locals. People would come down and buy. You have that already, but this is every Thursday night in the middle of this arts and crafts fair. Everything's juried. You have a body, the Village Fest board, that approves all vendors. It has to be arts and crafts, no clothing, and the artist or the vendor or the craftsperson has to be in the booth. The transaction's important. This isn't the internet, guys. This is personal, eyeball to eyeball, shake hands, negotiate the price, whatever you want to do. Have fun with it. We had food courts, and it was going to kill the restaurants. Except about two or 3 years after it started, the owner of Las Casuelas Terraza downtown, our largest, most successful restaurant, said, you know what, Jerry? This event just gave me a second Saturday night every week. So that's the kind of naysaying that gets turned around. It's like, you can't see it until it's there. You can't draw a picture. You can't plan it. You got to occur it. And we did it on 1 block, and now it's still successful. We will, when I left, and this has been a while ago, and I think I've checked the crowds, on a weeknight, on a Thursday night, during season, 8 or 9 months of the year, you'll get 10,000 people on the street, plus the ones in the restaurants. 10,000, you can't walk, literally. The good news is you have to walk on the sidewalk, and that puts you right next to the restaurants and the shops that are staying open finally. Because if you walk down the middle of the street, it's going to take you a while. In the summer, it drops to 5,000 to 6,000. It's 100 and some degrees, and you got 6,000 people. Most of them local. It's a block party. It's a family reunion. It's where people really interact. Where do the tourists want to go? Where do the locals go? You get the locals down there. What's Thursday night? When do people check into hotels? Thursday night. What do families want to do? Get a head start on the weekend. Thursday night, let's go to a movie. No, we'll go to Village Fest. Have fun. Very successful. These items really turned downtown around. The other one's outdoor, and by the way, key element, live entertainment. We had live entertainment virtually every block, 2 or 3 entertainers auditioned. The funny one I tell is that these people had fun with it. We had a guy out there who was really outstanding, and he auditioned. We weren't paying him anything. He could sell CDs. He was really good. Then I guess I found out that he was a lead singer with Iron Butterfly. And he wanted to have a blast. He was out there just having a hoot. Nobody knew who he was, and he didn't care. His agent was really ticked, though, I got to tell you. Anyway, so the whole fun, festive feel, and people started coming back and coming back. The other thing we did is an events calendar. We expanded that. We have 1 major event a year. That's the signal. Okay. Anyway, so in conclusion, there are a lot of other things that need to be looked at. Obviously, downtown housing is in my opinion, a very serious issue here. A good opportunity, shall I say. Transitional housing for the homeless, yes. Workforce housing for people that work here. Where do they live? We've had women's lodges in downtown Palm Springs for women that work in the restaurants and the hotels. Affordable housing for millennials. You want millennials. That's who's going to make your future. They have all the energy and the excitement and looking forward. They want the funky little cafes and bars and coffee bars and so on, and they want the events. But they can't afford to live here. They're not going to come. The thing that turned us around was Coachella. It's not even in Palm Springs. But guess what? The millennials will go to that by the thousands. And where do they stay? Palm Springs. It's friendly to them. Indio doesn't have what we have. They're probably going to get there. But Coachella did that. And right now we are, and I'm on the tram board for the last 12 years, Palm Springs Aerial Tram. And our attendance has gone through the roof. We're at work capacity. And where's that coming from? Millennials. They came to Coachella, and they discovered Palm Springs and the tram. So I think there's a lot to work on. I think that there's a lot that can be done with the homeless. I hate the word, but it's something that I think you have a tremendous opportunity for, if you want to look at it that way. Where else can you have the ability to pull together block captains for downtown, the police department, code enforcement, churches, service clubs, chamber of commerce, and nonprofits? There's got to be a team here that can put this together. I'm on a board of elders of a downtown church. We've had encampments in the front of our door to our sanctuary, and I won't tell you what I find in the mornings, but we've taken care of that. And a lot of that is getting a person from the street, actually lives in the church, we provide him a place, and he knows how to deal with it. So anyway, I'm getting the thumbs up. So does that mean something?
One of the things Jerry's too modest to mention is he went to work for Palm Springs as a contractor on a one-year contract, and they actually renewed it every year for 15 years. So it gives you some idea of what a role he played in Palm Springs. He mentioned Bob a moment ago. That's Robert Shelton over here. Just raise your hand. Robert's the, as of last December 1st, the president of the Shangri-La Group, which is my for-profit division. And with him is David Rose over here. And David and Bob Shelton, they did the Palm Springs Convention Center. So they have a lot of expertise, which we'll make available to anybody who wants to take advantage of that, because they know how to do that with hotels and tourist attractions. I don't know, show of hands, how many of you ever heard of the Indian wise fool named Nesrudin? Have you ever heard of Nesrudin? Okay, so he's the wise fool, and he's a cultural icon in India. And there's all these Nesrudin jokes. So one of the Nesrudin jokes is directly applicable to Santa Barbara. There's a friend of Nesrudin, and he sees Nesrudin walking around very pensively, looking at the ground under the street light, because it has this really great light coming down. And he says, Nesrudin, what are you doing? He says, well, I lost my keys. I'm looking for my keys. His friend says, well, let me help you. So they start looking together, and he said, so where were you when you noticed that they were missing? He said, well, about 3 blocks from here. Well, Nesrudin, why are you looking here? He said, the light's much better. That's the point of the lighting story Jerry told, and hopefully it'll help you remember it. Sodium lights are not only not too attractive, they're extraordinarily expensive to maintain. When you switch them out for an LED, he used the word LED, which stands for LED, you save a ton of money, you get more attractive light, and all of a sudden, the whole community starts to look alive. Notice how good State Street looks when the lights are twinkling at Christmas time. Lighting does a tremendous amount. So I share that with you because what Jerry's trying to say to us, and I think we need to take at face value, is maybe we can't do everything Palm Springs did, and maybe we can do some things they didn't do. But it's a series of these things working in concert, which changes the dynamic so you don't see 27 empty stores. So with that, you'll know now what our agenda is, what we're trying to accomplish. And I now want to introduce briefly Amy. Again, we passed out these little flyers so you know her background. I am extraordinarily impressed with this woman's tenacity, her commitment to solve the problem, how even-keeled she is in the whole thing. She's willing to look at every point in the compass. And I think we're really, really grateful and fortunate that Amy's been willing to become the chairwoman of this task force, the Santa Barbara Retail Task Force, which you'll be able to get a hold of her through the World Business Academy. We have a email account for her that you'll be hearing about. And what I want to do now is officially turn it over to the chairwoman.
Well, hello. Yeah, chairwoman, I want a crown or a cape or wand or something. I'd love a wand, actually. That would be fantastic. I think what I'm reflecting on sitting here tonight is that we were just all here in February or March meeting. March, actually. Yeah, March. And already look at the impact the World Business Academy is having by gathering people together, already getting resources, getting people who know what they're doing on all these different fronts, pulling a task force together. I feel like there's a lot of momentum. And we're super grateful to you, Ronaldo, for having the World Business Academy. And thank you for asking me to lead. I think that my role is mostly to listen and to try to synthesize all the information that's going to come, not only tonight, but once we put this task force together, and to try to come up with a real strategic plan. I think what the community needs to know is that the fight for State Street is the fight for Santa Barbara. It's the heart and soul of Santa Barbara. It's such a gem. And financially, of course, it also generates the sales tax that pays for schools and parks and police forces. And I think people can get really cynical, or retail isn't what it used to be, or shopping isn't what it used to be. And then we hear Jerry speak about the kind of dynamic heart of a town that you can have, where locals are coming downtown and running into each other. I know you go to the farmers market and you see, half the town. Well, what if we had an event every week that was that kind of community gathering place, and then where the locals go, the tourists go as well. So I've lived in Santa Barbara over 25 years, and even if I didn't have a store here, I'd be super passionate about trying to save State Street and having this vibrant town where people want to be. We just have one of the most beautiful towns in the world. So I don't want to see that lost in these issues that are not only Santa Barbara issues, they're national issues. But we can come up with Santa Barbara-based solutions. So the only reason I said yes is because he promised me we're going to just solve it. So we've all been in a lot of rooms talking about the problem, and I'm a real solutions-based business owner, and I think one reason he chose me is everybody told me I couldn't open a store, I'd never had a store, was going to fail within the first year. I was going to lose a couple $100,000 within a few years, and I'm highly motivated by being told I can't do something. So so I'm going to try to be of service as best I can and really be someone who's listening to everything coming in and trying to synthesize that and put that together into a plan. It's not about me knowing how to solve this. If I did, as I said, I'd wave that wand. So that's all I have to say, but I'm appreciating being here and looking forward to hearing what everyone has to say. Thanks.
I'm just hoping she's as motivated by being told she can do it as that she can't do it, because I think she can. The next probably requires very little introduction. Our next panelist is Hal Conklin. You all know Hal from his activities here in the city many years ago as mayor, for a long time, of course, as the public relations officer for Southern California Edison. But I've been always impressed with when he left that job. He decided to go do something about the environment, and he's single-handedly led an effort to plant over 1 million trees. So he's somebody who puts his boots on the ground and doesn't just think about great things, but tries to walk one step at a time towards that solution. And so can't think of a better person to be on this. Hal, would you share a few thoughts with us?
Thank you, Ronaldo. And Jerry, it's great to have you here. When I went to Palm Springs 20 years ago, I told the story about how when I first got elected, I went to the Chamber of Commerce and I said, what is the slogan for Santa Barbara? And they didn't say God's waiting room, but they did say it was the home of the newlywed and the nearly dead. And I thought, well, that's not a very inviting slogan. But the fact is that the one thing that you do notice in Santa Barbara is, and I'm going to share a few trends that I see that I've learned over the years. I'll give you 5 trends, but let me just make a couple of other observations. One is, it is true, there is a cycle about every 30 years, the community reinvents itself. And I put up a couple of slides, and I actually handed out, if some of these have these quotes in it that are on your seats here, but If you go back all the way to the 1870s, what I would call the American period, you'll notice when you read the media of the time that people were complaining about the loss of old Santa Barbara. By the time you get to the 1920s, the Pearl Chase era, and the earthquake that occurred in 1925, you get this whole movement towards how are we going to stop the loss of Santa Barbara and reinvent itself? But you get everybody saying, no, we don't want it to grow too big. By the time you got to the 80s, it was moving towards how are we going to take downtown and reinvent itself. And I think the term that I took away from that period of time was not so much reinventing, but reimagining what Santa Barbara could be. I was really impressed that Disney uses that term for Imagineering. It's really giving you a chance to sort of think about what it could be. If there were any observations I made during that whole period of time, though, it was, and I say this to every new colleague, I see Oscar in the back of the room and the other new council members here and Kathy in her new role, is that you find over time you start out thinking you're actually in charge of where the city's going, and you find along the way you're an active participant, but the community as a whole is in charge of where Santa Barbara is going to go. And if there's one observation about that process in every step through every one of those 30-year cycles, it was that it only worked when the community as a whole came together to make it work. And it never worked when the city formed themselves into blue ribbon committees to decide what it should be. The era of the blue ribbon committee is dead. This is really the era of collaborative planning, and we really are all facilitators to bring people into that conversation. Now, let me just suggest 5 trends that I saw during this period from 1980 till present. The first trend was that as you look at the changes that are going on in our society, you have to really recognize that the global economy is bigger than we are, and we can't create a solution which is just us. I was impressed back in the 20s that actually money had the name of banks from the Santa Barbara era on the money. Real US dollars actually did have local banks who sponsored that money. This one was from the Santa Barbara Bank. But you really need to have an economic development plan that becomes the guidebook or the roadmap for where it is you want to go. Santa Barbara coasted along quite successfully, I might add, by having a redevelopment agency. It didn't need to create an economic development department. It had one through the redevelopment agency. And through that process, they could fund a lot of stuff. But the moment the agencies were killed in California, Santa Barbara is one of the few cities left that doesn't have any economic development plan as an official department of the city. Without that kind of planning, you don't know where you're going because you have no roadmap to tell you how to get there. The second trend was that the downtown is really, as you're imagining it, has to be in a size that is a scale and a scope which is very walkable. And downtown in many ways is way too big. I was laughing, we were talking earlier during the break about the funk zone, how successful it is. And of course, its name, the funk zone, came because everybody in that area, as we were redeveloping downtown, said, look, this is the one area we want the city council and the city to keep its hand off of. Do not get involved. We want to keep it funky so that the rents don't go up. Well, guess what? It got to be successful, and now everybody in the city says, hey, let's go in and help you fix it. But the reality is that you've got to have really a variety of ways to change the concepts of downtown into districts. What I propose the waterfront district, because these are natural zones, the entertainment district, the central city district. It's interesting that the central city district, one of the things that was most successful with the homeless issue was that we actually used artists, storytellers, and brought them in to sit on seats on every block and tell stories about Santa Barbara. And that became the place where everybody wanted to gather around those storytellers. There was no room for people to sit around and panhandle. The historic district, which of course Santa Barbara is famous for, and finally the cultural district, which is the center of so many of the celebrations that go on. The third trend was that housing and transportation planning have to operate hand in hand. There's only so much housing left, and the current council certainly knows better than anybody how tough it is to add density into this community. Because as you're spreading it around town, one of the problems is that people still then have to drive somewhere, and the neighborhoods start feeling like they're being overwhelmed with cars. They don't believe that people won't take cars. But if you actually build housing around where the new jobs are going to be in the downtown area, people can walk to work, and they actually believe that that will happen. The fourth trend was that vibrancy in a community really requires a 24/7 presence. You got to have stuff going on all the time. And that's kind of stuff that Jerry was talking about in terms of street fairs, et cetera, but it also means that's when you have housing in an urban environment. People are walking to the store, they're out on the street all the time. And if you want it to be vibrant, you can't just have it vibrant during the day or on the weekend. And then finally, the city has to be involved in providing incentives to new businesses to establish a base downtown based upon the plan that you have. Now, I know we don't have redevelopment agencies, so it makes it much tougher, but that doesn't mean it can't be done. You know, Paseo Nuevo only really worked because the city used parking lots and gave 2 spots for what was then Broadway, now became Macy's, and on the other side was Nordstrom, and they literally gave them rent for $1 a year for 99 years. I mean, that's the only reason that Nordstrom is still operating there today is the rent is so cheap they can't afford to leave. But you can make all kinds of deals, as other cities are, in how you actually incentivize getting the right business in the right place. If you said we want 4 or 5 key businesses downtown, and we want to build housing around it and transportation around those businesses, there are ways you can incentivize it to happen through a whole variety of techniques. So these 5 trends are just 5 that I picked out of a whole number of them, but I think that they sort of give you the picture that you have the opportunity to make things happen. It isn't just doom and gloom. You really have the opportunity for the future.
I meant to mention earlier, in addition to the task force here and other people who have already volunteered to be participants with the task force, so it's growing, we had a meeting yesterday with Ken Uplinger of the Chamber of Commerce, who's 100% supportive of this effort. Had a prior commitment, couldn't be here tonight, but wanted us all to know that he was right there with us in trying to create these solutions. The final speaker tonight, and before we go to Q&A, is the man who I expressed a lot of profound respect for earlier, Ron Fox. It takes a very special kind of human being to spend that many years, 3 decades, trying to help find solutions. So, you know, PATH stands for People Assisting the Homeless. It's not pretty work, and it's not particularly light and engaging and fun things you do on a Saturday night. It's what you do because you're deeply committed to finding solutions for human problems, which also have huge negative impacts on communities. And the better you handle those problems, the better you handle the solution with the homeless. So with that, I'd love to introduce Ron Fox for a few thoughts.
Thank you, Ronaldo. You just gave my speech. It has been a long time. It's been 35 years since my wife and I have been involved in this with the formation of PATH down in Los Angeles 35 years ago. I know that because we're having a 35th celebration in August, I believe. And it's been a long road, a difficult road. As Ronaldo said, homelessness is not a pretty issue. And unfortunately, I think that homelessness in one form or another is going to be with us no matter what we do, because there's always going to be a disparity between the haves and the have-nots in this world, if not in this country, and in this city. PATH is attempting to attack the problem here in town. There is no overarching solution to this. We are just trying to help human beings get back into society with dignity. And it's a very difficult task. At PATH, we started out 30 years ago, 25 years ago, and with support from the government. But at that time, the government was insisting that we have a policy called jobs first, not housing first, but jobs first. The idea was to take the homeless in off the street, give them a bed, give them some food, get them a job, have them save some money by giving us their paycheck, and we'd open up a bank account for them, and then they would be able to get back into society with dignity. It didn't work out too well, and so now we have, from the government, the idea of housing first. The idea being there that if you can get a homeless individual, whether he is on drugs or whether he is psychotic or whatever it is, if you can get him out of the encampments that they have around the various different cities here and bring them into a housing situation, give them a key to a small apartment, then you are able to bring the social services that are necessary to help them get back on their own into society. And so that's where we are today. This Housing First model is working. It's working all over the country. It's difficult here in Santa Barbara. As you can imagine, there are very, very few rentals. There's very few housing developments that are going on. There is money around for this, but we don't have, up here, we don't have the space and maybe even the drive to start attacking the problem. We have to build our way out of this problem. So we at PATH are here to help and assist any way that we can with the rejuvenation of downtown Santa Barbara. I would like nothing more to see that happen. I know that the people, the employees of PATH, which incidentally, when we started out in our kitchens in Los Angeles, PATH now has over 350 employees in Los Angeles. They have a $52 million budget. They not only handle or work on the problem in Los Angeles of the homeless, but San Diego has asked them to come down and take over a portion of their homeless problem down there. They have a 14-story Art Deco building in downtown San Diego, which they've converted into a homeless transitional housing and permanent supportive housing. And they also have sort of a mall structure. We also been asked, PATH has also been asked to go up to San Jose and attack the problem up there with the assistance of the government in San Jose. They were asked also to go to Sacramento and try and help there, but they decided that there were too many politicians in Sacramento, too many strictures, too many rules and regulations, and they decided that they would not assist Sacramento, at least yet. And we are the fourth of the districts in California that we're working, certainly the smallest one up here. But that does not mean that we cannot help these homeless individuals, some of them very, very distraught, come back into society with dignity and alleviate some of the problems here in town. So I am here to tell you that we will do our utmost to try and mitigate the problem. I don't believe that we will be able to eliminate it. Thank you.
Great. So that's it. We're off to the races. And when Ron speaks about housing first, which is not only what works in California, it works in Chicago, it works all over the country. And we recognize Santa Barbara has unique limitations on space. So it very well might be that the housing we have to create for the homeless may be less opulent, may not be directly in the middle of town, so to speak, may have to be something that we can support on the outskirts of town, may require a county-wide solution, may even require a Ventura and Santa Barbara County joint solution, because it seems like there's a lot of transition between the 2 points. So we don't have a fixed commitment as to what that solution is. We just know we need a partner like PATH and people like Ron to help us noodle through that as part of our economic drive to get a solution to this problem.